Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to try and answer a question about Citadel versus Motohara, or evolution blades. Now, both of these are sword companies that I've reviewed relatively favorably in the past, and I do get asked pretty frequently, hey, which one would you choose? Given that both of these tend to receive high marks, what are the pros and cons of either? They're both very expensive and not something that you get a chance to necessarily experience outside of people on the internet that ramble like me, or if you're lucky enough to have exposure to one that you know from somebody who happens to have one and will let you touch it. Anyway, I'm going to talk about these. I have 4 examples here. Now, all of them are secondhand. All of them I bought with my own money. Neither of them did I buy from the vendor directly, but they do give you some idea of what the pros and cons are, and I think it's enough of a sample size for me at least to say which one company tends to do a little better or what. Anyway, that's what I'm going to try and do. Also, as a side note, I know I look like hot garbage. Forgive my appearance. I have my corona locks going, and I'm otherwise very engaged doing woodworking and stuff and preparing the house for things. And frankly, you don't turn into my channel for my good looks. So I'm going to talk about the swords now. In terms of Motohara, I have the LMC. This is an early generation sword. I did a review on this one. I'll put a link in the description down below if you want more information on it. Then I have a Motohara, I believe this is called like a multi-purpose cutter or something like that. I don't exactly know what the model number is, but it's a bohi, and it's more applicable to collectors, to Iaido practitioners. It's not specifically geared toward tamashigiri, and you can kind of see based on the blade profile between the two, you have something very wide, very thin, very dedicated to be a lawnmower, versus something with a bohi, a shorter dimensions, a little thicker blade. I'll try to put links in the description thing down below, or details and all of that kind of stuff. Then I have a Citadel Ocean and a Citadel Bamboo Katana. Both of these have very similar blade profiles. Both of them have kind of handmade fittings. Both of them are very similar, though the Citadel Ocean has been somewhat customized. The bluing has been removed from the fittings, and this one has been extensively used for both cutting. It's been sharpened. The other I've used quite a bit, but I haven't sharpened it. I haven't really diminished the polish, and it's pretty close, I think, to what you would get should you find one new, or if a new Citadel product comes out with similar features, it'll give you some idea. Anyway, those are the 4 that I have and kind of relative conditions. Now, as I compare the two, I personally am just going to go out and say I prefer the Motohara blades as a practitioner. From a purely pragmatic and practical standpoint, I think that they are a superior product. The way they glide in and out, the overall level of attention to detail between the two products is actually pretty close, but the Motohara just seems to fit together that much better, and at least in the realm of a Japanese practitioner standpoint. The way they glide in and out of the saya, the way the polish has a little bit of zazz, the sound that they make, and the overall shape, just I have that much more attention to detail, and I think are that much better. So from a Japanese practitioner standpoint, I prefer the Motohara blades, both for cutting, both for Iaido, and, well, for both of those things. In terms of why you might choose a Citadel, or the things that I like more, there's some handmade goodness that happens with the Citadel, and it has a little bit of unique character to its own. And if you like that, I certainly don't think it's a bad product. There's a lot of attention to detail in the Citadel as well, and I don't mind cutting with it. I think they make an excellent product. However, I prefer the Motohara for practice. And in terms of like zombie apocalypse or which one's more durable, I don't really think either of these products are necessarily geared towards that type of customer. In terms of collectability, both are relatively rare. The Citadel blades have something like 100 blades of each made. I doubt that the Motohara has any number like that made in their lines either. So they're all pretty equivalent in terms of collectability. Realistically, these are potentially collector pieces, practice pieces for people that want a good out-of-the-box solution for Iaido and want to use a shenken or a sharp live sword, or somebody that's going to be cutting tatami mats or practicing swordsmanship. So that's kind of the lens that I'm looking at in terms of as I compare these things, and why I think the Motohara stands out a kind of a step ahead of the Citadel, in my personal opinion, because that's the use case that I'm talking about. Okay, so if I talk about the general soup to nuts, front to back stuff on the sword, I generally start with the fittings, and I start with the kasha, the pommel, the end cap area. And if I look at these, and I'll try to overlay some better images so it's not just me pointing at them in the background here, but just the Motohara pieces use relatively well cast pieces. I can't say exactly where they get them from, but they do appear to be cast pieces on the Fuchikashira, Minuki, and I think the Suba may be something special. I'm not entirely sure on the Motohara. The Citadel, on the other hand, use hand-carved fittings, and I like the look of the Citadel. Even the bamboo has very plain, simple, no embellishment Fuchikashira, and I prefer that handmadeness, even in its simple format, to the cast. There's something about the handmade side of it that I find more alluring, even if it's kind of more pragmatic or simple, given the price point. The the carving on it is also worth noting that the Citadel carving is cruder than the casting quality on the Motohara using good fittings. So I still prefer the crude hand-carved fittings to the more perhaps elaborate and well-cast pieces that are used on the Motohara. So I don't know exactly. I'm sure you could potentially get something fancier on the Motohara if you want. They offer some customization options, but the fittings that I see on these two appear to be cast, and I like the Citadel pieces better. So my nod would technically go to the Citadel in terms of fittings. Fujikasha, Manuki, as well as Suba. The Suba on the Motohara examples that I have appear to be like water jet cutout something. I'm not exactly sure. They're very detailed, fine. They're great from a practitioner standpoint. They're light. One of them got banged around in shipping, and I would say is potentially a little bit more fragile, but I still prefer the Citadel Suba. I think they have more character given that they're hand carved, and so nod fittings wise will go to the Citadel on this one. Next, I'm going to talk about the Ito. So this is silk, then I have leather, then I have two examples of silk. All four basically have small, very consistent diamond shapes. All the Ito is tight. This Citadel has been used extensively, and it does have some give in the Ito, but not a lot. It's still very tight. Obviously, after an extensive amount of use, the Ito remains very good. So kind of a testament to overall usability and longevity here on the Citadel side. But I've used the LMC quite a bit myself. I've used it through many seasons. I brought it outside and cut with it while it's really cold. It's been in really humid summers, and the Ito is still very tight. Overall, I think they're pretty even Stevens when it comes to tightness of Ito and overall quality of materials on the Ito. Underneath we have Samegawa. They all appear to use very high quality Samegawa. I don't know if they are panels or full wrapped. Either way, however they're constructed, the handles have held together pretty well. In terms of overall handle construction, I am going to say that it's also a wash. I think that they both do a great job assembling the handle. All are very comfortable. Special nod to the Tensho one here, though. I haven't practiced with it or owned it very long, but I will say this is my favorite handle out of the four. I like this really wasted bit right here, and I like how it swells toward the kasha, the end right here. Big fan of this. I love the overall execution. I love how it feels in my hand. I like the leather, though admittedly, on hotter days, especially if I clean it or something or my hands get wet, this leather gets very sticky. Not something that I don't use leather a ton, so it's not necessarily uncharacteristic, but it is worth noting that in the leather. Anyway, again, going to call it a draw on the Ito and overall handle shape. Suba, going to wrap that into the fittings. I told you I already prefer the Citadel. Next, I'm going to talk about this little bit of man furniture, the Habaki, and here I'm going to go Motohara. I think they do more classic, characteristic Japanese styles. I prefer them. The Citadel, I like the Habaki. It's got character, but that's about the nicest thing I can say about it. It does kind of groove in with the bohi on the blade. It's a little bigger than the average Habaki. It's interesting and unique and different, but it also seems a little too unique, a little bespoke to Citadel, and you might like that. I personally prefer the shape and overall execution on the Motohara Habaki. Now I'm going to talk about Saya, and both of the Citadel examples, this happens to be the one from the ocean, and this happens to be the one from the multi-purpose cutter of the Motohara. And there's just some examples. Saya-wise, in terms of fit and finish, they both offer more embellish, so don't let the fact that this one has a Samegawa panel or Samegawa skin on it kind of influence you. Motohara offers more options, and they have Samegawa full wrapped, all sorts of things that you can get embellished on the side. What I'm talking about overall is the shape. The Motohara is a little bit thicker. I like the elegance and kind of thin profile of the Citadel. I like the way it feels in my hand. I like the Koiguchi more, and they're all very refined and well done. Both have little shidome that are stuck in really well. I am, however, going to go for the Motohara in terms of execution. If I look at the Koiguchi area, the Motohara just does it better. Also, the Citadel tends to bind ever so slightly, just a small bit of binding in the saya. It's a little, and it's not really noticeable, but the Motohara glides in and out of the saya. Both examples do. They're excellently fit in the saya. And while it's a little bigger around the Koiguchi area, and how I hold it feels marginally less comfortable, overall the execution and usability of the Motohara I feel is superior. So again, comparing these four saya, I'm going to give a check mark to the Motohara. Now I'm going to talk about the blade, the pointy stabby part. Now, I think obviously if you're going to cut specifically Japanese style tatami mats, Motohara offers blade profiles that are really heavily geared towards doing that activity. If it's talking about cutting aptitude, it's going to depend on what you're trying to cut. Again, I think most of these are going to be used by Iaido practitioners. The practical or multi-purpose blade here feels excellent in the hand. It's a little bit heavy for an Iaito, but the way it moves around is actually pretty comfortable, and it makes a nice kind of wind sound. I find it to be very comfortable, easy blade to use. The LMC is actually also very comfortable to use for Iaito. It's very light, and so it doesn't feel particularly more heavy in my hand than a lighter or medium-sized Iaito or a dull blade made from zinc aluminum alloy. So both of these blades feel very good for Iaito, and if you are cutting specifically tatami mats, I think it's probably going to go without saying, but the Motohara has a blade profile that just lends itself to that activity better. Now, which one would I choose if I were going into a war? Probably the Citadel piece, honestly. In terms of durability and how thick it is, that would probably be the choice I would make in terms of which one is going to hold up better to moving spear shafts and banging into other swords and last a little bit longer. I would probably go with this kind of more pragmatic 1075 steel. That could be out of ignorance on my part. I've never done that activity with either of them. But the LMC that I have here is a little thin. It's not meant to whack spear shafts or anything like that. The multi-purpose cutter, I haven't spent enough time with it to really honestly say, but I have cut a number of things with these Citadel pieces. They're very resilient, very durable, and so if it's a war, I'm probably going to bring the Citadel. For any JSA activity though, Iaito or mat cutting, I'm gonna choose a tool that's a little more geared towards that activity, and that would be one of the Motohara pieces. Now, in fairness, I don't know honestly which one is more durable. All of them are very refined, well-made blades, but something about the shape of the Citadel kind of lends itself to being a more generic all-around purpose blade than the Motohara does. In terms of blade shape, I again prefer the Motohara. If you're going ahistoric and don't mind something a little goofy, specifically driven towards cutting tatami mats, then these wider profiles are excellent at that. The Citadel is no slouch, but the Motohara I just think does a better job. And this practical or multi-purpose cutter here just has a more kind of traditional Japanese shape. I like the shape of the Citadel, or I'm sorry, the Motohara blades more than I do the Citadel. The Citadel, again, has this kind of odd Kisaki area, and they've mentioned that it's historic and that they have examples, or at least that was my interpretation of what was said, that these are historically influenced blades, but I have yet to find anything with quite the same type of Kisaki area and termination of bohi. It gets a little bespoke again to Citadel, a little unique on the Kisaki side, and so I prefer the general shape overall of the Motohara pieces. In terms of polish, I'm going to again give the nod to Motohara here. There's, generally speaking, it's subtle because I've cleaned these off numerous times, but perhaps this multi-purpose cutter has a more bedazzled hamon. At least it juts out and has a little bit more zazz to it. It's a little easier to see in the right light. I can make out the details in the hamon of the Motohara easier than I can on the Citadel pieces. The Citadel is differentially hardened, as are both the Motohara pieces that I have here, but the hamon is very subtle. There's not a lot of polish happening on the Citadel. There's a lot left on the table, frankly, in terms of overall polish on the Citadel piece. And considering it's a kind of work of art piece, kind of an art-ish sword, especially given the price, I think that would be one area that Citadel could refine, given that a number of people probably don't cut with the Citadel pieces, even though they could. But the Motohara pieces have simple mirror polish. It's nothing overly artful, but I find that the hamon pops out and it's got the zazz that I'm looking for. So if I go to polish, I'm again going to go to Motohara here. In terms of like sharpness and functionality and all of them are excellent swords though. So just because I'm nitpicking these things, don't think that either one of them are bad or that the difference between them is so substantial that it's miles ahead. They are nitpicky details. Both of these companies make excellent products. You would be proud to own any one of them. I would just give a nod to the Evolution blades, the Motohara pieces specifically. I think they do a little bit better job. That said, I am blessed to own all four of these, and the other swords that I do own, none of them are bad. But again, for what I do, I'm trying to get better at cutting tatami mats that are stationary in a quasi-competitive, hopefully one day competitive if the world stops being on fire. I'll get to go to one of those competitions, and hopefully I'll have learned enough to be proficient at it. That's what I'm working on, so these tools are specific to that, or doing kata, standing, moving it around, and doing an old Japanese sword art where I move the sword in kind of a choreographed way, and the Motohara just lends itself to those activities a little bit more. Citadel, I still think they're a fantastic product though. I still recommend the Citadel products. If you like them, go buy them, and I do think the fittings are better on the Citadel pieces, or at least I like the handmade nature of them. If you also like kind of the unique look of the Citadel, if there's something about it that tickles your fancy, then don't let them dissuade you. It's not so ahistoric or terrible or bad or anything. Hopefully I've reiterated and repeated myself enough on that facet. None of these are bad. But if you ask me which one would I prefer, which one would I buy more of, I bought more of both. But I would probably nod my head more towards the Motohara, given my use case. Anyway, that's all I've got for you. Hopefully the video has been interesting. As always, cheers and thanks for watching.